Hey everyone, welcome to another webinar. Glad we have some live viewers. My name is Carl. I'm the founder of SwimSmart. I wrote a lot of this in material and educational stuff. So thanks for joining. Hope it's useful and you pick up some tidbits. I'm wearing my the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in the two fly today. So kind of a play on an old saying, and we're a couple minutes early, so we'll give people a few minutes. I'll show you. We have a swag shop here where you can find a whole bunch of crappily made memes put on T-shirts. So if you guys are running out of clothes, that's one place to find them. But we're here for the main event, which is season planning. So let me get this full screen, and I always have to swap it and get my pen out. Okay, so I know that kind of the new season is upon us. We're just getting into the summer session here, long course, and I, this thought process is really like, okay, I'm a new coach on deck, and I've never done this before. I used to swim, now I'm a swammer. How do I train these kids? What am I supposed to do? So this is kind of the starting point for a lot of these talks. And hopefully, this is just an outline and a guide to help you think like a coach, not necessarily like specific details on what to do. But you can always steal any of these ideas and implement them, and I'll show you where to get more, where we have them on the website. If you forget, if you look to buy anything, webinar 20 is our code for 20% off just because you came and visited us today. And if you ever have questions later on, you can reach me directly at this email, sales@swimsmarttoday.com. So let's get started with season planning. So again, this is just kind of an example, and we're just practicing our thought process on how to set up the entire season. There's no one size fits all. You're going to have to modulate and change it depending on your team, your practice days, how long your season is, the abilities, what facilities you have. But I think it's always a good process to kind of think through it. So this is kind of the big picture that we're going to go through piece by piece. So if don't get overwhelmed here. But if we just take a look at this, we got the number of weeks here. So first off, we have to lay out where we're going, right? So Chinese say a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. Well, I say if you don't know where you're going, you can travel 1,000 miles and still end up nowhere. So I like to list out all the weeks of the season. So this is an example here. We have 16 weeks, and there's kind of two big swim meets. There's a mid-season swim meet and like an end of season championship meet, and then all the weeks, and obviously we'll have swim meets in between. So I like to see the whole plan before I get started. And then I list out like, okay, what are the important things for me during each of these weeks building up to those big swim meets? So that's our training focus kind of column here. And if you imagine the kids are coming in from the off season, they've taken a couple weeks off or a month off, or maybe you have high schoolers that are seasonal swimmers, so they went and played football, and now they're coming in and they're like totally out of swimming shape. So first thing for me is to build that base, right? Endurance training, which is these, first 4 weeks. And again, I'll show you here later on, we're actually going to swim all of the different training zones all the time, but this is our main focus for these weeks. And then as we get closer and closer to the swimming, to a big swim meet, we transition from more endurance to more like actual race training. So we're getting closer and closer to what an actual race looks like. And then of course the week of that meet, we kind of hit a little taper, and then the cycle kind of repeats, right? So we go back to endurance a little bit, we go back to race training a little bit, and then I used to joke with my kids, they'd always start asking like a month before the end of the season, like, are we tapering yet? So I came up with this silly term called pre-semi taper, which really means that we're not tapering, but it makes them feel like they're tapering. So these can also all kind of be combined, and then taper at the end for the big swim meet, right? Now, there's a bunch more columns here, and these are a combination of helping your kids understand why we're doing these different types of training, and kind of building a scaffolding for when you're writing workouts, what do you want to focus on? So I like to always tell the kids like what in their biology is actually being improved with different types of training. And actually, I have a whole nother PowerPoint slideshow that we can do later that kind of goes through those. But in endurance stuff, it's all going to be, on the endurance side of things. So these energy system focuses, AE stands for aerobic endurance, which is kind of like your mile. Think about like if I was going to swim a mile, that's aerobic endurance. Aerobic power is closer to like a 200. So you're doing 50s on a minute, holding a best average. That's kind of the idea there. But then as you get closer and closer down the season, we move into more speed type stuff. So a combination of aerobic power, which is the 200 pace, and lactate, which is like hundreds, broken hundreds. We're going all out. And then speed type stuff is like more power and top speed training. So like bucket 25s, parachute stuff. Of course, again, we're going to do all of these all the time, and I'll show you how we're going to adjust these throughout the season to make that our main focus, okay? And then for me, I like to make each week a specific focus of something. And these are just the ones that I choose are important. And from season to season, it might totally differ. But like the first 2 weeks, I want the kids to learn how to swim distance per stroke, right? So I want them to maximize every inch out of every stroke that they take. But then later on, maybe we start building back the tempo. So we do more race pace stuff, or like on the 200, okay, we want to hit this many strokes per 25. On the 100, we want to hit this many strokes. Just, stuff like that. I would say especially for backstroke, butterfly, this becomes important. And then, we start focusing on race strategy. So we do more broken 200s, broken 500s. And again, these are just the things that I think about. You can always think about totally different things, list them out. This is just to help you think of like listing them out, seeing them in front of you. And that way, when you go to write a workout, it's way more productive, efficient, and you can explain it to anybody who asks. Like, why are we doing this set? Well, because we're at this time in the season, because we're focusing on these things, because this is how it translates to your biology, and this is how it's going to make you swim faster at the end of the season. I got another column here for dry land. Again, we're not going to go through all these in detail. I kind of have them up in other talks, but circuit training is like the only training on land that actually improves your heart and cardiovascular system. But then we move on to heavier lifting, and then more fast lifting, and then we take some time off, and then we kind of repeat the cycle again. So you'll see how all of these fit into these kind of 2-week microcycles. So I use these 2-week templates to write my workouts, and I'll show them here in the next slide. And then of course you have your macrocycles, which kind of start at the beginning and end at a big swim meet. So either a mid-season meet or the championship swim meet. Obviously you don't want to have too many macrocycles, otherwise you're just breaking up the entire season and you're not building things through the whole way. I'd probably, if I had to guess, you probably want to do one macrocycle at most every 8 weeks. So you don't want to shorten it up any too much. So this is how I do it. But again, like you might have a season that's 24 weeks long. You might have 3 big swim meets that you need to prepare for. And I forgot to mention this earlier. I wouldn't do this with like age group swimmers. So 12 and unders, I would just train them in a slightly different way. This is for the older kids who need to kind of build a base and kind of build a triangle up to where they peak. And so that's why this is more important for those swimmers. So again, just trying to focus in on who we're actually targeting here. So I'm watching the chat. If you guys have questions as we go along, hit me up and I'll try to get to them. So we kind of went through a lot of this already. Where's my mouse? I lost it. There it is. Okay. So macrocycle is that 1 to 2 month long, and we're focusing on a long-term swim meet. The microcycle, short-term racing focus, and then the workout, I usually just do two, maybe 3 sets a day, and it has a training focus, which is all up here. So these are your 4 training zones, or swimming, training zones, and so this is what gets adjusted throughout the macrocycle. The microcycle, these are your weekly focuses. So this is what gets adjusted throughout the weekly cycle. And then your workout is kind of all the little aerobic power, aerobic endurance, speed stuff. But again, I think it's important that no matter what your focus is, you should be able to relate it to something that's biological, something that's in the race, that you can tell people about. And I tell the kids before every set, we get out of the pool, and I tell them this is the set and this is why we're doing the set. So we have many talks, many books. We're not going to go through all this today. We'll focus on how we adjust these throughout the season. Okay, so here's our example. We're going to go through, here it is. Okay. We'll skip to this one. So here's our example. We're going to go through the first 4 weeks, right? So our endurance is our focus, a lot of aerobic endurance, aerobic power. So if you were to take our 2-week template, so I went through this in a different talk, but this is kind of day 1, day 2, day 3, what we do. So each of these boxes is one set. And so we do 2 sets a day. Usually the fast stuff is is early, and the slower stuff, the longer swimming stuff is afterwards. If I were to break up the entire workout into 10-minute increments, I'm basically only going to adjust how much time I spend in each of these things, right? So early on in the season, most of our time is going to be spent on aerobic endurance. We'll do like a little bit of 200 pace stuff, maybe like 30 minutes in the morning, but like the speed stuff here is really short, only 10 minutes on top line speed. So all out 25s on a minute, for instance. Same with like your lactate sets, which are these all out 50s and 100s or broken 100s. We're not going to spend that much time on it because the kids are really too out of shape at this point to benefit that much from it. And the body really benefits, like the heart and the muscles and the mitochondria. They take weeks and weeks to build up to maximum capacity. Whereas the speed stuff is a more nervous system thing. So that changes much quicker. And so you don't need to spend a lot of time on it early on. Now, obviously, different coaches will argue different things, right? If you get the ultra short pace training people on here, they'll tell you that's all nonsense. That's okay. We can have the debate. No worries. But to me, this is what's important. So as we go through the season, you'll see that these boxes change in size, right? The fast stuff will start to grow and the long stuff will start to shrink. But it's not so much about yards, I would say. It's more about how much time you actually spend in each of these categories. That's really what's important. And then here at the bottom, I put like what kind of dry land we're going to do, and I write that separately. And then, of course, the weekly focus, so when I go to write the actual workouts, I want to know, like, okay, what's this workout supposed to train? Like, yeah, I can write 2100s on the 130 go, but what's the actual thought process? What am I going to mentally engage with the kids? For me, first 2-3 weeks is going to be all distance per stroke stuff, okay? So next 2 weeks, nothing really changes in the sizes of the boxes, right? We're still kind of small on the top and big on the bottom. So that means we're going to spend, like 60, 70 minutes doing more of an aerobic set, and maybe just like 30 minutes doing a fast set up front. Again, depends on how long your workouts are and what you need to do. So let's see how things change now that we're going down the season plan. So now we're getting closer to the race. We're going to switch from endurance to more race training. We're going to switch kind of a little bit less aerobic endurance and a little more 200 pace and 100 pace stuff. And so let's see how this changes. So the boxes all kind of equalized, right? So if you look at this, look at this box here. If we go up a couple, that box used to be pretty small, right? We're only spending 10 minutes on it, but now we're going to spend like 30, 40 minutes on it. So we're going to do 20 25s on a minute, and then all out, and then we'll put fins on and do 20 more 25s on a minute all out, something like that. So we end up taking a whole 40 minutes for this block instead of 10 minutes. And of course that's going to cut into the time that we have to do aerobic endurance, right? So then we take a break, we put paddles on, we're going to swim 3100s on whatever time frame, and that finishes out the set. And these are of course just really basic sets off the top of my head. We change our dry land, so now it's going to focus more on recruiting those muscles, getting them to activate faster and faster. We dive into those details in different segments, but just to show you how things are changing. So, and then we change the race strategy. So our focus in the workout, we're not focusing on distance per stroke. We're not focusing on tempo anymore. How are we actually going to swim this race? So a 200 freestyle, we're going to break it up. One 100, small rest, 250s. Okay, on the first 100, do this. On the third 50, do that. On the fourth 50, do X, Y, and Z, right? So we've changed even mentally what we're doing. And we do kind of 2 more weeks, and then this is race day here, so we're not going to do a full taper. Remember, every time you taper for a full 2 weeks, your body's actually de-adapting. It's reversing the things that you've built up. But because you have more rest, you swim faster during that time. But that's not going to last long, right? You've opened this window, and the window is slowly closing. And the more times you open the window, the less time you're actually spent training your body to improve, right? So this first kind of in-season swim meet, we're not going to take a full 2-week, 1-week taper. We're just going to do a few days of a bit of lighter swimming. And I wouldn't change what the template does. I wouldn't change the speed work. I wouldn't change the aerobic work. You just shorten it all up, right? So instead of doing half an hour of all-out 100s, you're only going to do 10, 15 minutes of all-out 100s. Instead of doing an hour of paddle work, you're only going to do 30 minutes of paddle work. And you do that just for a couple days, and then you go race and you try to hit some best times and go fast. Of course, you don't want to overload the body, so we get rid of the dry land during that time. So that's kind of our first macro cycle with using microcycles, using individual sets. So hopefully that makes sense on how we're kind of building from a big picture to a medium picture to a small picture. And then we restart this cycle, but we kind of go through things a little bit faster. So the endurance, instead of spending 2 weeks on endurance, or 4 weeks on endurance, sorry, we're only going to spend 2 weeks because the kids are in pretty good shape by this point. They're not coming from, football and then jumping into the water. They've been doing this for 2 months now. They can get across the pool okay. So we don't need to spend quite as much time or as much focus on the endurance. So we're going to spend maybe more time in this macro cycle on the faster stuff, the race pacing stuff. And then we're going to spend a bit longer time on the taper because we really want that window to open so that we can swim as fast as possible. Great. So if you look at our template, it kind of looks like the first 2-4 weeks that we reviewed kind of earlier. The fast stuff is only doing 20 to 30 minutes, and the long stuff is going for 60, 70, 80 minutes, for instance. So very similar to that. And then the next 2 weeks, we go into a more equalized what am I trying to say? Time on each of these training zones. So now we're doing maybe 50 minutes of this, 50 minutes of that. And if you notice, the dry land is also switching up with the rest of our template. And then once we get to taper, this is kind of where things change a little bit. So the big thing about taper is you don't want to totally switch things up. You don't want to do brand new things that's going to affect the body in a different way. It's going to make the muscles sore, break them down. Really, all you want to do is the same exact thing you were doing before, but just less of it, right? So mini aerobic power set, a mini aerobic endurance set, a mini one for stroke, a mini one for kick. So you might just be spending 10, maybe early in the 2-week taper, you might spend 20 minutes on each of these. And then, on the second week, you might spend just 10 minutes on each of these. So your yards and your time are slowly going down until you reach, the very last few days. You basically almost just warm up and then rest the rest of the time and then try to go race and go fast times. I will say that maybe the only other thing I would add, especially like the last week, maybe some hypoxic sets. So we're going to do 50s on a long interval, so we get plenty of rest. 50s on, let's say, 2 minutes. Go down, no breath, come back, 1 breath. On a 2-minute rest. And hypoxic sets, we can dive into that more another time, but really it's resetting your nervous system to get used to the higher carbon dioxide levels. Make sure the kids don't hyperventilate before they do that because of complicated reasons. You could pass out without feeling like you need to breathe. So we don't do that. We're just focusing on swimming with our head down, mimicking the races that we want to mimic, like the 50 freestyle. Everything else, people should pretty much be breathing. I also like to give kids, some choice to work on things that they feel like they need to work on, whether that's starts, turns, a different stroke, a different kick, yada, yada, yada. So, again, this is just kind of big picture overview stuff. We kind of go through it fast. There's nothing really to it. Big takeaways here are that break up your day into like 10-minute increments, and then you adjust the size of the workouts, and you take more time on speed, less time on endurance the closer you get to swim meets, and adjust the dry land as you go too. So quick overview of season planning. It doesn't have to be complicated. Obviously, as you get more and more in tune with things, if you're like a college coach, maybe you track how many yards or how much stress you're putting on the kids week by week by week. You compare it to how you did it last season. You compare it how you did it to last year. See what the results were. So you kind of have this baseline guideline now, but you can take that and build on it as much as you want. So if you're looking, I know I said a lot, I discuss this later or another time, and we talk about this at other times. So let me show you quick where to find those other details. So we have all these books that go through the biology of things, on how to write workouts, how to schedule the season planning, how to work on dry land. And if you go to our website at the very top, if you go to the bookstore, you can find all those resources there, along with some others that we have partnered with. And if you like the video format and you prefer that, you can go to the courses section, where you can find a lot of these recorded videos just like we did right now. And you can have access to them forever and show them to your team, show them to your parents, and so that they kind of get an idea of what everyone's working for and working toward. And that's it. That's all I got. Quick, short and sweet. Join us in a couple weeks. I think we're doing a progression drill set on breaststroke. So put the reminder in for that on our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this and you picked up something new, like, subscribe, share with your friends, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks for joining.